Hello, everyone. I really wanted to do a labor and delivery story. One, for me to look back on, and two, throughout my whole pregnancy, I just looked at positive birth stories. I just looked at positive induction stories or positive unmedicated birth stories, but I really didn't do the research into a C section. My mom had C sections, and a lot of people around me had C sections, but I was like, that's horrible for them, but that's not going to be my experience. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My baby was born on January 3rd. On January 2nd, I had an appointment. And my sisters, one came from Utah and one came from Mexico. So they came for the holidays, for Christmas and New Year's. And I really thought my baby was gonna be here on Christmas time, if not a couple days after Christmas. On my 38-week appointment, I was like, this is my last appointment that I'm gonna be here. Like, I'm not gonna come back here. I was that sure because I was already experiencing a lot of pain. On New Year's Eve and Christmas, on Christmas I was in pain, but it wasn't as bad as New Year's. On New Year's, I was in so much pain. My mom was like, "Oh, you want to come over?" I was like, "No, girl. If you guys want to celebrate, you guys are coming over here. Like, I'm not moving." I was in so much pain. I was in the ball. On the 30th, I took my sisters with me. We went to the park. I was curb walking. Um, I did the Starbucks drink. I was pumping. I was doing everything because I was like, I need this baby to come out. And then when the 31st came and that didn't happen, I actually cried a lot. I was like, oh my gosh, like I really thought I was gonna have a December baby. My sisters are leaving. One of them had already left, but she lives in Utah, so she could kind of come back. But my older sister, she was leaving the next day. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I really wanted her to meet my baby. But obviously, it's not when you want to, it's when the baby wants to. So she leaves, and on the second, I have my appointment. Now, on the first, in the middle of the night, I was in a lot of pain. My contractions were like 8 minutes apart, but I was crying of pain. And my husband was like, should we go to the hospital? And I was like, no, I think I can make it to my appointment tomorrow. And yes, at 2 p.m., I actually had my appointment. I have notes here. I had my appointment at 2:15. So we go to my appointment, but one mistake I made, and this is another thing, on the last couple of weeks, like 36, 37, 38 week mark, make sure that you eat before you go to your appointments because I promise you, you'll regret it. I didn't eat before my appointment. I should have known better, but I was in so much pain a night before that I told my husband, I was like, let's just eat after the appointment, um, because we stayed up all night and then I just woke up, got ready, and went to the appointment. And that was a huge mistake that I ended up paying for it later. I go to my appointment and my doctor could see the pain in my face. She was like, I can tell you are just not having a good time. But she checked me and I wasn't dilated. And I was so mad. I was like, how on earth? Like, I'm in so much pain. But she was like, I'm sorry, but we can get the show on the road. And I was like, an induction? And then she's like, well, we can apply Cervidil, which is like primer. And then after that, we can start the induction. So I was like, okay. My blood pressure was also high, and she told me that that indicated that I had been in pain. And I was like, girl, I'm not lying. Like, I am in so much pain. So they sent me to labor and delivery, and at 4:33, we had an ultrasound because throughout my whole pregnancy, I had blood pressure issues around the 34-week mark, and we always knew that the baby was going to be big. Um, in the ultrasound, he ended up weighing 8 pounds, 10 ounces. And then the doctor came in and she was like, he could be 10 pounds, 11 ounces, or he could be 9 pounds, 2 ounces. With ultrasound, it's kind of iffy, like you just don't know. We decided to get admitted at 4:33, and that's when all the IVs and everything started. The IV in your hand hurt so bad. I never had an IV in my hand. I've always had it like here. Um, Before I got pregnant, I had to do a lot of blood work. I was actually going to an endocrinologist, so I was used to getting poked. But the one in your hand, man, that one burned. But anyways, I get admitted, and then at 5:10, I got the Cervidil put in. Admitted. They have my IV. Um, I can hear the next door. I can hear them delivering a baby next door. I'm just a little emotional. I'm so scared. Um, I have Cervidil right now. I felt a little uncomfortable, but it didn't hurt. Um, Jim went to get food. I think my sister and my mom are gonna come up for a little bit. Um, but yeah, I'm just a little scared. And I got food, and I think it's funny because it says food with like 5 O's, so I know I was hungry because I hadn't had food at all up to this point. I called my little sister, well, not little, but younger sister. She's freaking 17. And I'm like, hey, can you bring me food? And she's like, yes, of course. So I ended up explaining to them what was gonna happen. My parents came in and we ate, and I was very calm, cool, and collected. I'm also very lucky. My labor and delivery nurse, I know her. She was gonna be with me until 7. At 7, they switched off, and the other nurse was amazing as well. You could tell she's done that her whole life, so she was very experienced. Just like you could just tell. And my friend, the one that I knew, she was a freaking angel. Uh, like I think my experience would have been very different if she wouldn't have been my nurse. But at 7 they trade off, and around 6:40, one of my other close friends comes in and she's like, "Hey, how are you?" She's like, "You look really pretty. Hopefully you have your baby soon." And I was like, hi." She's like, "I'm gonna put IV on you, like fluid in your IV because your baby looks like he's asleep." And I was like, huh, because I could see the contractions going on in the monitor already, but I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, okay, cool. And so then she was my friend. We just started talking about something else. And then she was like, okay, bye. And I was like, okay, bye. And then my other friend, my labor and delivery nurse, she left. And I stayed with the other nurse. And she was amazing, and she knew a lot of the terms, so she starts explaining to me what was going to happen. She's like, we're going to leave the Cervidil for 7 hours, and then tomorrow we're going to start with the Pitocin and like all the drugs. And I was like, okay, perfect. I was like, let's get it rolling. I had my sister get me snacks because I was like, I'm going to be here for a while, and Jim's going to be here for a while. Now, this is something that I'm so cocky because I really had no idea. The second nurse comes in and she asks me, do you want an epidural? And I'm like, no. Like, I don't know. In my head, I'm like, I'm not gonna need it. I'm gonna be unmedicated. Like, but I'm like, well, just in case, you know? And she told me, she was like, just keep in mind that if you do want an epidural, the anesthesiologist is going to be at home with his family asleep. So if you want the epidural, just keep that in mind so we know the time frame. And I was like, okay, but in my head, I was like, I'm not going to need it, but he can be asleep, you know? Now, things changed around 11-ish, the nurse told me, you need to rest because tomorrow is when labor is going to get started. Well, this girl would not let me rest. You know, at the top, you have your monitor, and at the bottom, you have the baby's monitor. And she kept coming in and moving the baby's monitor. And in my head, I was like, it's my fault. Like, I'm moving too much, and that's really why she has to keep coming in. Because I could see, I was only keeping an eye on my contractions. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is moving. And my husband was like, oh my God, look at the peaks. We're like, look at the peaks. And the nurse comes in and she's like, huh. She's like, it looks like your baby's still asleep. Let's keep putting liquid IV on you and just keep monitoring the baby. She was like, we want him to wake up, we want him to be active. But I'm like, huh, like, what do you mean? Because, like, my contractions are going. I didn't know that it was different. Like, your baby being awake or asleep had nothing to do with the contractions you were feeling. That was just your body. Again, guys, I didn't know anything, okay? So, everything changed kind of around 12:30. My doctor comes in and she's very serious. She didn't have the same face as she did when I got admitted. She's like, so we're gonna take the cervidil out. And I was like, okay, perfect. And I actually ended up being 60% a phase and to a -1. So I was very happy. I was like, oh, things are moving. Um, but after that, she comes in again and she's like, unfortunately, when you have contractions, I can tell you're having them more consistent now. You are now dilated. However, your baby's having a really hard time breathing. We can tell that when your contractions are peaking, your baby's going on the negative, which means that he's having a hard time breathing. And I was like, okay, like I was confused, but I was still like, well, we can still do it naturally, right? And she's like, I think we're gonna need to have a C-section just to make sure that your baby's okay. You know, he's a big baby, and we just want to make sure he's okay. I was like, okay. And she's like, okay. And I was like, okay, we can do it later. I was so scared at this point. And she looks at me and she's like, no, we have to do it now. I turn around, look at my husband, immediately I start shaking. I had no idea how bad you could start shaking, but it's the adrenaline. I was shaking so bad to the point that when I agreed, they bring in the paperwork to start signing everything. I couldn't sign anything at all because I was shaking so bad, and I started crying. I started panicking because I wasn't expecting that. I thought I was gonna rest, and the next day we are gonna start labor. That was in my brain. I couldn't grasp the fact that um, everything had changed to that point. And even though it wasn't an emergency C-section, it was very unplanned. So the anesthesiologist comes in, and I'm like, what are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be at home. So in my brain, later, I was like, oh my God, to be a fly on the wall. Like, they knew I was going to get a C-section. They've been monitoring my baby the whole time. And they knew that I was going to end up with a C-section, you know? He comes in. I cannot call him by his name, but let's call him Toby. He comes in, he's really nice, and he starts bringing all the paperwork. Now, something that you should know when you get a C-section is from the moment you say yes, a lot of people start coming in at once. And I think that's why I started to panic more, because it wasn't just my doctor, it wasn't just my nurse, it's different nurses, RNs, the anesthesiologist, paperwork that you have to sign. And the anesthesiologist is like, okay, when I put the epidural or the anesthesia, you cannot move. And I'm like, okay, like I'm literally shaking. I am crying. I was so scared. I told my husband, I was like, I can't do this. And he's like, well, you kind of have to. But bless him, he was so patient. I'm so scared.
Don't be scared. It is okay.
No, it's just so, I was not expecting that. So I knew he was gonna be calm enough, cool and collected enough to keep me cool and collected. Um, I'm sure he was crying in Spanish on the inside because I could see it in his eyes. And later he was like, I was pretty scared. And I could tell that the doctor was really positive and calm, but like I could see that she was nervous too because you just never know what's going to happen in the OR. Um, when the doctor told me, oh, she was like, you're gonna meet your baby. I was so scared. Um, Something else that I think it's very rare. Um, I would walk to the OR. I wasn't like in the bed or anything, and I think I needed that walk because I needed to stop shaking so much. So I had two nurses walk with me, and we just walked to the OR. And I think that's crazy. I've never heard of that. I always thought that you had to be, you know, wheeled out. So in my head, I was like, okay, I'm gonna meet my baby. I'm gonna meet my baby. But I was freaking out. Um, Now with the epidural, usually women are in a lot of pain when they get the epidural, so they don't feel it, or the contraction pain is more than the epidural. But I was so scared because I was still shaking at this point. Toby was still like, okay, you can't move. And I was like, what do you want me to do? Like, I told him that. I was like, I'm just shaking. I was like, I'm so sorry because obviously I'm freaking out, but I don't want to be disrespectful. So I hold on to the nurse. It was a male nurse, and he like grabs me and he's like, don't move. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you're okay. I got you. You're fine. You're safe. And I was like, okay, okay. And at this point, they put in the epidural, and after that, everything happened so fast. My husband wasn't there with me. They lay me down, and the anesthesiologist, Toby, um, he starts putting a lot of liquids, IVs, and things like that. And I started to feel a little bit, obviously, you start feeling numb. That was immediate. I know that for some people, um, they feel things like with the epidural, sometimes it can fail, but I think they put the epidural in something else. I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure because like I wasn't feeling anything. I know that some women say, "Oh, you feel pressure and tugging." Nothing. I felt nothing at all. Nothing at all. I see my husband, and I immediately start crying because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like we're gonna meet our baby." But at this point, I didn't realize they were already cutting me open. It was seconds later that I start hearing my baby crying, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, I started crying.
Yeah.
And I really thought that they were gonna bring the baby to me or let me and my husband be with the baby. No, things changed pretty quickly. The nurse was like, okay, dad, you can come with us. But I was just very confused because I'm like, I haven't met my baby. Like, where's my baby? He was crying a lot, so I knew that he was good, but I didn't know what was going on. And I'm just like this in bed, and they're stitching me up. But I noticed that I started to feel extremely nauseous, and the anesthesiologist is behind me, and I'm like, Toby, because that's the only thing I can say. Obviously, that's not his name. But he's like, "You're okay." Now, throwing up while you're numb, it's the weirdest experience ever because, like, I can't feel the muscles, but I can just feel like liquid coming up. It's disgusting. I'm so sorry, but I'm just being very explicit here. Um, he's like, "You're okay." He brings me a suction thing. Kind of when you go to the dentist. That's the best way I can describe it. He brings me that, and he puts it like on the side of my mouth, and I start throwing up. I threw up everything I ate at 5. Literally everything. And I noticed that my blood pressure started, like, I just started to feel really like, whew, you know? And he's like, "Your blood pressure is getting low, but no worries. We're gonna put IV so to keep your blood pressure high." I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure that's what he said. And I was like, okay. So the more liquids they pump on me, the more stable my blood pressure was going to be. So I was like, okay. So he turns around and I look and I start looking at my blood pressure go low. Like we were not even in the 3-digit mark anymore. It was low, low, low. And at that point in my head, I was like, I haven't met my baby. Like, please God, like I haven't seen my baby. Like, I don't want to pass out or God forbid something else. Like, I haven't met my baby. Like, what is my husband gonna do? I was so scared. And he turns around and he's like, "You're okay. You're okay." And I threw up again. Um, he really, Toby, shout out to Toby, he really kept me very calm because I was losing it. I really was losing it. I was so scared. I probably shouldn't have looked at the monitor, but oh my gosh, like it was impossible not to. He really was trying for me not to look, but when he turned around to grab the bag, because I threw up again, that's when I looked and I started freaking out. But he really, 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 like, God bless doctors, nurses, everyone, because they really deal with your emotions. They're like psychologists almost. He really calmed me down, and then after that, he's like, "Okay, let's go to the room, and you're actually now gonna meet your baby." And I was like, "Okay." He gave me a rag because this poor man, I don't even want to know what he smelled, but he gave me a rag, he cleaned my face, and they switched me over to the bed. But at this point, when they switched me over, my IV snapped. And I was like, oh, like I felt it just like, ooh. And I was like, ow. Um, it hurt so bad. And I, what hurt the most was knowing that they had to put it in again. And they put it in like right here. And it looked like I was bitten up. This whole part was bruised because one of the hardest things for me is finding my veins. No one can ever find my veins. So they kept poking me until they found a good vein. And afterwards, everything was like green, freaking brown, purple, you name it. So they moved me to the other room, and I'm drugged up still. Like, I'm like all loopy, but I'm like, I just want to see my baby. Um, I meet him in immediate tears. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you're my baby. Like, it's so crazy. Like, meeting someone that you've had in you for like 10 months at this point. It's the weirdest experience ever. Um, that's when the nurses and the doctor came in and they told me that my baby had the cord wrapped around his neck twice and once around his whole body. So that's why when I was contracting, he just couldn't come down. He was having a really hard time breathing because literally the cord was wrapped around his little neck. Um, I did skin to skin, and then literally they put him on my friend over here. I started breastfeeding immediately. Thankfully, he latched immediately. I was very loopy, very nauseous still, but I was like, no, like, I'll breastfeed. And thankfully, I've been able to breastfeed. but that's a whole other journey. Let me talk a little bit of my recovery real quick because that part, I feel like no one really talks about it. It is brutal. You have a catheter on, and honestly, I loved having the catheter. For me, it's like, do not make me go out, do not make me go pee, because I'm a cry. So when they had to take the catheter out and I had to pee for the first time, I was like, like I can't do this. It's funny because I kept saying I can't do this, but I kept doing amazing. Like the goal for the day, I remember, was getting out to the side of the bed, and I was able to walk to the bathroom on the first try. It's a lot of mental, like, battles, if that makes sense. Like, physically, I was messed up. I was bleeding. You're in diapers. You can't move. My nurse, again, she came back, my friend nurse, and she was phenomenal. I was naked the whole time, okay, because I'm breastfeeding. The amount of modesty that left my body that stay was crazy. Nurses kept coming in, and I was just naked, like all out, all everything, just feeding my baby. Normally, I would have put a shirt on or be a little bit more, modest. I was just naked the whole time. But after 3 hours, they moved me to the postpartum room. And something that really no one talks about, or at least on Instagram, whether they have a natural labor and delivery or C-section, is they have visitors right away. And for me, mind you, it was in the middle of the night. I had my baby at 1:54 a.m. So I couldn't have visitors. And honestly, thank God. There's just so much going on. There's nurses coming in all the time, checking on the baby, making sure the baby's okay, doing exams on the baby, taking the baby to do all sorts of testing on him. I'm still like loopy, throwing up. I threw up every other hour. I threw up. Sometimes I would have to tell my husband to take the baby away from me because I had to throw up. It was a lot. And a lot of people just put it on Instagram like, oh, it was amazing and phenomenal. It wasn't like that for me. I really thought it was going to be so different. I thought I was going to be able to get up and hold my baby. No, I was not able to do that at all until we left, the day that we left. And that made me really sad. Now, cluster feeding. I think that was day 2 or day 3. Whew, I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea. I honestly almost stopped breastfeeding at that point. The way the nurses explained it to me is your baby is putting in an order for later, but I was feeding him literally every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. Uh, at one point, I was just feeding him like asleep, but I had to get up to change him to the other breast. It was brutal. We got out of the hospital, and me and my husband were like, what was that? On the second day, my mom came in, and Jim was able to sleep for a little bit. I was like, go home and sleep because we don't know what tonight's gonna be. And that's something that you have to be, even with your partner, like you can't get resentful of the sleep that they're getting, because at the end of the day, I had no choice. He was the one that was gonna be taking care of the baby in the middle of the night, and it was just me and him in the middle of the night. Like my mom would come in for a couple hours, um, but it was just me and my husband at the end of the day. Um, you really fall in love with your partner more, or you hate them. There's really no in between because you are so vulnerable. You are in so much pain. Like, once the anesthesia started wearing off, I was like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, I was crying of pain, breastfeeding my baby, still nauseous because the anesthesia was still coming off of me. But um, I was like, I don't have any more food left in me. I left it all in the OR. Like, what is this? But it's really my blood pressure was still going up and down, up and down. And once we came home, I felt way more relieved. Honestly, thank God for my mom. She has been amazing. She comes in every day, for the most part, and just helps me clean or helps me hold the baby while I take a shower or helps me and my husband sleep for an hour or two. My husband went back to work, and that was another learning curve because up to that point, he had changed every diaper. He had been amazing burping. He does swaddles better than me, he changes diapers better than me. Um, and that is such a blessing. I've heard horror stories of partners just being like, oh, that's your baby. I've also heard that as a new mom, you just want your baby, so you don't let your partner be as active with the baby. But for me, I had no choice. He had to be that caregiver. He had to do it. He had to learn because I physically couldn't do anything. So, in a way, I think that's a positive. The fact that um, he had to learn how to be a dad off the bat. He said that he felt a huge sense of responsibility, especially because I was drugged up in the other room. So he's like, you just never know what could happen. Um, I'm honestly so blessed with the man that I married. That was the best decision I've ever made because I don't think I could have babies with someone that just didn't care. I'm sorry, but like, you are so vulnerable. He literally had to use the peri bottle on me. He would lift me up every single time off the bed because um with the nurses, it was a little bit more pressure on me to like get up. But with him, he's 6'2", okay? He could carry me no problem. So he would just lift me up with no problem. Help me walk to the bathroom. He had to give me a shower. Like, I'm telling you, you feel so useless. I remember brushing my teeth a lot because I'm like, I, I don't have control of anything, but I can brush my teeth. And when I came home, still, I brush my teeth all the time. I brushed my teeth before, okay? Don't think I'm nasty or anything, but I was like, I just have no control from here down. Like, just have control over smelling good and being clean. So, until this day, I appreciate brushing my teeth more. And the moment you look at your baby, any pain you feel, any discomfort you feel, I still don't get sleep. I still sometimes cry in between feedings because I'm not sleepy. But oh my gosh, like I look at my baby and he's worth everything. But I've learned that it's okay to be super grateful and to complain at the same time because it is the biggest blessing, but the biggest challenge. Like your whole life changes. You are responsible for a little human that he can't tell me what he wants. You know, this his only way of telling me is by crying. Um, he's 3 weeks and 5 days today, and I cried earlier because he's so big now. He was born 7 pounds 10 ounces. He lost weight to 7 pounds 3 ounces, but by his 2 week appointment, he was 7 pounds 15 ounces. We have his 1 month checkup tomorrow, so I'm excited to see how much he's grown. But I was crying earlier because one of my closest friends had her sister had a baby, and she sent me pictures of the baby. Precious little thing, but he looked so little. And I was breastfeeding my baby, and I was like, oh my gosh, like my baby doesn't look like a newborn anymore. He looks bigger, and he's just a little chungus. And I'm so blessed that he is growing so much and that I've been able to breastfeed him. I'm getting the hang of it. I'm starting to feel a bit more comfortable pumping. I've pumped once actually, but I use the Haka. It is a lot. It is so, so much. I had no idea. My baby has taught me more patience than anything else ever has. because they're so fragile. They depend on you. Like the only thing they can do on their own is breathe. And even that is questionable. I'm like this the whole time. I have the all-wet sock and everything, but he truly is the most precious thing I've ever seen in my life. Obviously I'm his mom, so I'm gonna say that. You're gonna say that about your kid. Um, but he doesn't do the scrunch anymore. And I was sobbing. I was like, oh my gosh, like when did you stop doing the scrunch? Like I literally picked him up after changing him, and I was like, oh my gosh, like he's a really long baby. He is 21 inches and a half as of 2 weeks ago, so he's longer now. So I'm excited to see how big he is by tomorrow, but I'm gonna go get him real quick so you guys can meet him, and I'll probably let you guys go. I'm sorry I cried so much, but it's very emotional. A couple days ago, I told my husband, I wish my body would have done what it was supposed to do. And he looked at me, he was like, it did. You have a healthy baby. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, it did. And at the end of the day, your baby's gonna choose how he wants to come in or she wants to come in, not you. And that's something that I've learned to just surrender and let things happen how they're supposed to happen. But that doesn't make them easier. Like, it was rough. Oh, he was asleep. Well, he's still asleep. But I love him so much. He is long. Um, his name is Alaric James. He's named after Jim's dad, and well, Jim's technically James too, so that's what we decided to go with. Um, I love him so much, like so much. He's my perfect little boy, and yeah, I would do it 1 million times over just to see his little face. I want 79 of these, but I'm gonna go. Oh, he's done. Is that a mini scrunch I see? You have so much hair, son. Okay, I'm gonna go feed him. But thank you guys for watching.